Let's see, yeah, this actually does work today. We're going to go ahead and get started, even if half the class isn't here. I wanted to review uh, the theories of communication and actually give you about 2 hours to do your quiz, in a sense. We're going to have team projects and presentations during the last 2 hours. So you should pay attention now because this is what your presentation is going to be about. I'm going to assign each group a theory, and they're to come up with a research project, not one that's already been produced, at least not to their knowledge. You don't have time to do a full literature review, so I'm not expecting that, but neither do I want you to go look up one that's already been done and just tell me what's already been done. That's not the assignment. So you brainstorm within your group the theory, what study you could do based on the theory, and tell us what tools, what methods you would use to conduct your study. So I'm going to go ahead and review quickly the different theories that will be included in this contest, so to speak. And again, I think there might be a couple of teams assigned to a theory if because there's more teams than there are theories that I've put into my PowerPoint anyway. So we'll start off with the direct effects, or what's sometimes called the hypodermic needle theory. I don't intend to read this. I put it on here so that you guys can have access to. This was copy and pasted from the textbook that I had you review at the start of the semester. But just to help remind you of what it is and how I think I don't know, you can also go back to that original textbook. I think he did suggest some um, some types of research that could be still conducted under this theory, mostly with advertising in the advertising area, which I'm opening this up to anything in communication. So you can go advertising or journalism or whatever. Of course, this one was early. Basically, the earliest theory was that it's kind of that the media had such a large impact on us that it was almost like a direct effect, that it almost like open your head and pour in the information and the prejudices and whatever else. But when it finally came down to where they actually did some research on it, this is where the two-step flow model was created, when they found that it wasn't so, that people were, at least not in the area of politics, something like that, that it wasn't, that the people they studied, they found were impacted more by opinion leaders. And so the information did come through the media, obviously, a lot of information, but then it went through the opinion leaders. You might say it had somewhat of a direct, you might say that it had a direct effect on opinion leaders, but they brought in their own opinions, their own prejudices as well, their own insights. And so what came out from them to their friends and those that depended on them for guidance in politics or whatever else it might be, was somewhat different than what was coming through the mass media. I think this is very clear right now in what's going on in America. If you only depended on what the 18 dominant liberal media in America was saying, it would be like a lynch mob, of almost 100% of the citizens going after Trump's head, basically, because that is the proportion of negative news about Trump and the 18 dominant mainstream media in America, 90% negative to Trump. So if it were a direct effect, then he would have no chance at all of being reelected. But the reason why the Democrats are trying to impeach him now is that they're afraid he will be reelected because he's doing too good of a job. The economy's too good. He defeated ISIS. You can go down the list of things he's accomplished. Energy prices are low. Just lots of things that he can run on. So they're scared to death he will win again, and thus they think they have to impeach him before he can be reelected. Agenda setting is also, a lot of these are spin-offs from the two-step flow model, and that's kind of one of the things the textbook said, was that once they realized that it wasn't a direct effect, then they had to start looking at, well, what other things are involved, and agenda setting is one of those. Agenda setting, in the most simplistic way of looking at it, you're looking at the media because you have gatekeepers in the media and so forth. But again, that's not totally accurate either to look at it that simply. So this model also indicates that, yeah, you do have the reality, and it goes through the gatekeepers into the media's own agenda, whether they're liberal or conservative or whatever they might be, but it still has to go through the public, and it doesn't. So you can really look back, and when you say public, you can talk about opinion leaders again. And so even though they're for example, again, the 18 out of the 20 top American media are liberal, by the time it goes through the public agenda, or the agenda, the way I picture it anyway, of the opinion leaders, then it has a different impact than just the media. So they do. There is the thinking, though, that in setting the agenda, for example, right now, there's, again, taking America the example, what's everybody talking about? Well, even those that are opposed to the impeachment of President Trump are talking about impeachment. And so the media is setting the agenda, even if they're not able to use it as a hypodermic needle on the public, as they might like to do. Then nevertheless, they do set the agenda, and everybody's talking about it, and then they proceed through the opinion leaders and so forth. So it does get mitigated considerably. It's not simply the hypodermic. The uses and gratifications theory, again, takes a look at it from the public's perspective. The agenda setting looks mostly at the media, and to some degree, it has been suggested by the textbook that it considers the public as being affected and not necessarily affecting the process. But in this model, if you consider the public, the opinion leaders and so forth, then that can be included in the agenda setting theory. Anyway, uses and gratifications, similar model, the audience, and they have certain motivations and certain things that they're looking for. They find some self-identity in media. They're looking for a sense of relationships, diversion. They just need a break, so forth. And so they seek media to fulfill their own needs and to seek their own gratification. And if they are successful in going through the media to accomplish that, then they are more likely to go back to those same media that help them fill their needs and to feel gratified and create perhaps a habit of going to those media to accomplish that. The symbolic interaction theory, a little more complicated, but it's just saying that basically symbols, it's a little bit, I didn't put in here the framing theory, but symbolic and framing are somewhat similar in that in framing you look at things people, if you remember, we had a video about one of the creators, or at least one of the promoters or whatever, of the framing theory in its largest sense, not just communications, but in its largest sense. He says that basically we think in terms of metaphors and symbols in our mind. And so this is kind of a little bit like that, like the framing theory in that sense, that we associate certain things in our mind and find identity with them. And so in advertising, it mentions here, it's something there that the media try to achieve. If you look at it, could be closely related to branding, for example. That if you see the logo for Apple, you think perhaps you think high quality, because that's what the way they're trying to brand themselves, and they use that as the the apple, the bitten apple, as their logo. And so, in achieving or in pursuing positive branding, they try to associate positive ideas and feelings towards a simple symbol like the apple of Apple. And so it could be something in the advertising field that you might want to study in that with the symbolic interactionism. But there would be other ways of using it as well. I mean, it might still be, if you're doing it intentionally, um, you at least could expand it from commercial to national and nonprofit organizations, churches, all sorts of organizations. The American flag, I mean, flag is a symbol of something. And whether it's positive or negative, obviously a nation would like its flag to be seen as a positive symbol. And so that's also a form of national branding. Spiral, uh, the spiral silence theory. Um, we associate it most with Germany during World War II, where the Jews themselves chose to be silent because they thought they'd be better off just keeping their mouth shut. Um, and then it turned out they were gathered up and millions of them were killed instead. So it turned out that was a bad strategy to keep their mouth shut. But that's the idea of the spiral of silence is that one group gains control of the media, and that group is so loud and so menacing and so threatening that the another group within that society just falls silent. Um, it would be easy to, I would say there are people, again, going back to my favorite topic, I guess, there are people in America that are just keeping silent because um, the Democrats don't just have the voice of the media, but they're doing things like if they identify somebody from the Trump administration or somebody wearing a Trump hat or something, they are attacking them in public, not necessarily beating them up that sense, but there have been people who have had to leave restaurants and stuff because they're associated with Trump. So they are menacing people in such a way that some, if they're not really strong, are just thinking, I can't wear a Trump hat. I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to, whatever. So there is definitely a portion of American society, because of the almost tyrannical activities of the left right now. It is scary to me what like on campus, they are blocking people from going to lectures by a conservative. They're again, there have been cases where they've actually started fires and stuff like that. So it can be kind of scary and threatening, and whether they're intending to do it or not, the spiral of silence theory is applicable in some societies even today. The cultivation analysis theory. I don't know why that's. I guess I don't know how that ended up in front of my slides. I don't know. Anyway, I suggest that media causes individuals to develop or cultivate a perception of a perception of reality that's not true, basically. So it's based on the repetitive and consistent messages of the media, and so those messages take on a reality of themselves. I remember as a kid, even back when TV was just really getting started, but so a lot of people got their entertainment off of radio still. My grandma, uh, she would start talking to my mom or somebody and start talking about what Phyllis did or what Julie did or whatever. It took me years to realize she was talking about people on a soap opera, on a serial, and to her that was she would just talk for hours sometimes about what was going on this TV show or whatever. And so I mean, that was definitely in her case had become part of her reality that it was something she was so totally absorbed into. Um, it's suggests that um, some of these things can be very negative. I don't think it has to be. Cultivation theory could suggest positive things as well. If you are playing music that is uplifting and positive and perhaps spiritual, and trying to spend some time contemplating the truths of reality, whatever, the truths of the universe, it can be, I would say, a very positive thing. I actually do that myself. I have some favorite music that's positive and uplifting and spiritual that I turn on my radio, on my computer, I mean, and listen to that while I'm getting started in the morning. It leads up to a time of meditation for me. So you can use it positively, but on the other hand, we've talked about things like pornography and whether or not it causes sexual crimes. I've already suggested that's really hard to prove, but um, as I've also mentioned in a study in America, 100% of rapists do use pornography, but not 100% of people who use pornography become rapists. That's the problem of trying to prove that. And there are even some that suggest that if people, men, I guess mostly, are so inclined that pornography might actually help them to avoid actually committing a crime. I don't know, but there's nonetheless, I would say that it does become part of their reality. If you expose yourself to anything too consistently, it will change your sense of reality and become a habit that will be hard to get rid of at some point. And again, if it's used positively, that's you don't want to get rid of a positive habit, so it can be used in a positive way. Disruptive innovation theory, we talked about Clayton Christensen and his theories about how um, how companies that are really powerful, monopolies, oligopolies, and it seems like there's no way that anybody could overcome them, are overcome by a startup, somebody that has very little financing, very small staff, it's not. It seems like it's no threat at all to the major monopoly or oligopoly, and yet, lo and behold, they come, and they if they don't take over the market, they at least become extremely competitive in the market. In some cases, they've destroyed major monopolies in that process, and they do it because, as Dr. Christensen explains, is that they don't. Let me go over the next slide. That's again, I just put the words on there. This is on Moodle, both the entire PowerPoint and the PDF version of it. So maybe I'll come back to that in a second. Anyway, so there's actually three different types of innovation that he talks about, but the two that are most relevant in this case is a question of where do you put your resources, your financial resources, and especially if you're in heavy competition with even one other foe. You don't want to waste your money. You want to be able to compete as effectively as possible. And so you're totally immersed into the mode of sustaining innovation. You are doing your very best to make your product better and better and better within the field that you're in. And so along comes a new technology, a new innovation. It doesn't have to be a technology itself, as we've talked about before, but a new innovation anyway, very frequently using a technology, but maybe using that technology in an innovative way. The technology could be somewhat old, but and again, it doesn't absolutely have to be a technology, although in this day and age, everything involves a technology in a sense. But so somebody comes along and let's take the case where it's not clearly not primarily technology, would be Grab or Uber. They're not technology companies, but they use technology to compete with taxis, and they offer something cheaper. And there's so many Uber or Grab drivers that you can get a taxi probably faster than you can get a regular taxi. So it's faster and cheaper, and they set it up on your phone, so it's very convenient. And so they are taking over that market. Um, so again, taxis originally probably thought they were kind of stupid. There are big taxi companies with lots and lots of employees and lots of cars, and they probably didn't take them too seriously at first. But they also, once they did take them seriously, what do? If that company is coming down with a price so low that they can't compete, or that's so convenient and easy to use that it's making it easier for people to use that new service. Uber or Grab, whichever, here we don't have Uber anymore, but having the app on your phone makes it so easy and cheap that there's not much taxi companies can do about it. So that's your ideal situation. You go in fact, people are using Grab and Uber that would never use a taxi. They would have found, they first off, it wasn't, if they weren't someplace where there are a bunch of taxis lined up, like at an airport, if you're at your home or something, you're not even sure, you may not even be sure how to get a hold of a taxi. And so you're not, you're basically, this is going after a totally new market too. That's one of the things that Clayton Christensen said, is that very frequently they're coming in at something cheaper, easier, and they're going after people who never, that's brand new to the market, such as myself. I think maybe I've used a taxi once in my life, maybe twice, but I use Grab and Uber all the time. So they've become such a part of our society now that, and they're predicting they'll even be more so. Especially as these companies start changing over in theory to driverless cars, then suddenly you'll have a new competitor that they'll just send a car to pick you up, and they're suggesting that hardly anybody will own a car anymore when that gets going, when the driverless car becomes accepted by society. Anyway, so the disruptive innovation then comes in and very much disrupts that industry. Diffusion of innovations theory it talks about how innovation spread through society, and that was created by Everett Rogers. And he talks about how It typically starts off with just a few people. As you see here, they're called the innovators, and they might only be like 2 to 3% of society, but they're people that are very willing to try new things, and they're not the same people in every industry, probably, but their inclination to try new things. If they're techies and they're the first ones to buy a better computer, but if they're into cars, then they might be going for the electric car or whatever. Again, it might not be the same people in every field, but there are innovators who will try things and they will spread the word. And so they may become opinion leaders. If they're not naturally opinion leaders, they become, by the very fact that they're the first ones trying something, they become opinion leaders, and they share it with others. And then the next group are the early adopters. And so that's a little bit bigger group. And then you hit your early majority. So about 34, about a third of the people suddenly come on board if things have been positive, if the opinion leaders have done a good job, then suddenly you surpass, between the three first groups, you suddenly surpass a majority. And then a late majority adds on, and then you have a relatively few laggards that finally accept it. Um, this might have to do with things like mobile phones. So older people might be the laggards, for example. So the kids are the innovators in that case, and they're getting the mobile phones. They're using all the apps and stuff. They're available. And the laggards, their parents and grandparents, are kind of, I don't know if I want to do that. So again, in every field, it may be a little different. Although probably in the diffusion of innovation, it probably would be younger people usually leading the way, and older people begrudgingly accepting new ideas and new technologies and so forth. Very similar to it is the tipping point theory. This was created by Malcolm Gladwell, and the idea is The idea of the theory is that something starts off kind of small, um, and it starts growing and growing and growing until it gets to a certain point that it just sweeps down the other side. So that last part can happen very quickly because it's gained so much momentum that yeah, maybe the first half in the innovation process or the spread of innovation might take quite a bit of effort to get it up the hill, so to speak, but that last half can take off very quickly. Um, and that and so these, like I said, these two theories are very, very closely related, and thus some people have suggested that this point where it says the chasm, that's the tipping point. So you take a look at the um, innovations theory, and you just put in there's the tipping. Now it doesn't look like the tipping point in this chart, just the way it's shown. But the point is about that place. It has gained so much momentum that suddenly everything becomes much easier, and suddenly you have both the main majority and then the early majority and the late majority suddenly coming up very quickly. And so your challenge is to get through those first two groups, and then you can gain so much momentum that it's coming down that other side. That tipping point can happen extremely quickly. And one of my favorite ones, the inoculation theory of propaganda. Um, when you look it up on Google, it's mostly talking about how to protect people from new ideas. But the way I think it's happening right now is kind of just the opposite. It's being used as an offensive weapon rather than a defensive weapon. But it happens in a way that you are somebody in the conducting the PR or whatever you want to call it, is makes you think that you understand two sides. They tell both sides of the story. Some of the most effective public relations press release and so forth, PR tools that I've seen have been done by people who had good journalism skills, and they were able to put out press releases and stuff that sounded like they wrote them as if they were journalists. And so it sounded like by the time you read the press release, it made you think you understood both sides. But in reality, they had made one side strong and one side weak. And so the point of the press release was to make you think you understood both sides, but obviously agree with them, with their side. And so my use of the inoculation theory of propaganda is a little different than what is typically explained. Mine is kind of just the opposite. You're not, well, you're protecting in the sense that you're protecting somebody that you are now putting, well, you're putting on a major campaign and you're pouring through society a lot of your opinions and your information, but you're doing it in a way that they also think that they understand the other side. And so they don't feel the need to go find the other side someplace else. If you can make them feel like they understand, for example, again, going back to the Trump situation, if the mainstream media can make its followers think they understand what's going on among the conservatives, they make them think that they understand Donald Trump, but not tell them everything. And if people are hooked to that particular media that's doing that, then they come out of it again thinking they understand both sides, but they don't have a clue on the other side. Their understanding of the other side is minimal. And then that gets tied up with one that I didn't put in here was the groupthink theory, but it could be associated to this, to either of these theories. That particularly my definition or my usage of the inoculation theory leads right into the groupthink theory, that if you can get people to agree with you and kind of be part of your group, then you're controlling the way they're thinking rather dramatically. But the key in using it as an offensive weapon, so to speak, is to make them think they understand both sides, but do your best not to let them know both sides. Just inoculate them against the other side. Okay, so that's just a quick review of theories. So what I'm going to do then is split you up in, well, you're already split into teams. And each team is to take a theory. And again, they're to review the theory. If they need to review it more than what I've already reviewed, then continue to review, look at some of the text perhaps that I put in the PowerPoint. I uploaded into Moodle both a PDF of the PowerPoint, but also a PowerPoint in case you decide you want to use a PowerPoint, you can. And you can just start with mine and redo, you can take, use slides I started with, add some more slides, kill the other slides just to make yours, be a quick way to get started. And especially if I have graphics and stuff, you can use those again. Add some more of your own if you want to. You don't have to use a PowerPoint. And clearly, those who present first, I will. Well, let me put it this way: I'm going to give you about an hour to work on this. To get ready for it. So talk about it, argue about it, come up with something, some research that you could do based on that theory that you're assigned, and then be ready in that last hour to come up one at a time. I'd appreciate it if you, the temptation will be to keep talking to each other while a group is presenting. But if you do that, you won't understand the theories very well. And I can guarantee you this sort of stuff will be in the final exam. So I really encourage you, once we start presenting, to actually listen and become more familiar with both think about the methods and the theories behind the methods. I know some of you have taken courses on this, but this will help prepare you for the final exam. As I've explained in the past, this is a new course, and so I'm trying to make it a little bit research, a little bit reality, so to speak. Not having been the one who created it. So we definitely will be talking research, or there'll be exam questions on research, and there'll be exam questions on things like the Christensen's work with API. All the ideas that they start creating when they start brainstorming ways to fight the digital. Now as I said, they weren't real successful, but you should for your final exam, you should be familiar with some of the ideas that were developed by the American newspapers as a way to protect themselves from the digital media, even though they weren't successful or haven't been by and large. They were for a while in many cases, but not enough. Let me put it that way. So this one will be worth 2 points, and we'll put it in place of a quiz as each group comes up. So let me assign you. I'll stop.